She thought the worst was over until the truth came back to find her. What started as a quiet escape turned into a nightmare of secrets, betrayal, and a past that refused to stay buried. Every step she took to move forward only pulled her deeper into a web of lies. And someone was always watching, but this time, she won't run. Because the only way out is to face everything. Running from the truth only gives it more power. No matter how painful the past is, facing it is the only way to truly move forward. Strength isn't about escaping. It's about standing your ground when it matters most. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to like and share. Your support is what keeps this channel alive and motivates us to bring you even more powerful stories. Thanks for watching.
Vincent's words came back to me. If you receive that text, you must run. I looked at my phone again. David's message seemed to glow, ordering me home. Something felt very wrong. It was not just the cold words, but a deeper feeling. My instincts were screaming at me. I read my dad's letter one more time, my hand still trembling. Then I carefully folded it, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in my purse with the key. I did not go to my mother. I did not go to our car. I walked the other way to the back of the cemetery where I had parked alone. My phone vibrated again, a call from David. I ignored it. Behind me, an empty coffin was being lowered into the ground. Ahead of me, a storage unit held secrets I was not sure I could handle. And in between, my father was either living or I was going insane. I climbed into my Honda and locked all the doors. In the rearview mirror, I saw David's black Audi enter the parking lot. He had come to find me. He was here. I started the car, my heart beating fast. I hoped that whatever was in Unit 20 was worth all of this, because I was choosing to believe a dead man's letter instead of my living husband, and that scared me more than anything. Alone in my car, I made myself read every single word my dad wrote. My hands were unsteady as I opened the letter for a second time. The first read was a frantic scan, my mind yelling this could not be happening. Now I needed all the facts. Through my mirror, I saw departing mourners, their headlights cutting through the Austin evening. I had locked the doors with the engine on. My window was cracked and I could smell the autumn leaves. My dad's familiar writing looked up at me. Emma, if you are reading this, I am alive, but I had to disappear. Everything I'm about to tell you is the absolute truth. 20 years ago, my choices put our family at risk. I thought the risk was gone. I was mistaken. 5 years ago, a man came into your life. You call him David Miller. That is not his true name. He was sent to you on purpose to ruin me by hurting the one thing I love most, which is you. 6 months ago, I learned the truth. I have been coordinating with federal agents, but the danger increased. The only choice to protect you and your mother was for me to vanish, to make them believe they had already succeeded. David is not the person you believe he is. His love for you might be real now, but that does not make him safe. It makes him a greater danger. If you have gotten a strange text from David telling you to come home, do not listen. They know I am not dead. They are using him to locate you. Go to Unit 20 at Lone Star Storage on South Congress. Find Agent Michael Carter inside. He has the answers. You have to go now. You and your mother are in danger with every passing minute. I am so sorry, more sorry than you can imagine, but I did it all to keep you safe. Listen to Carter. Follow your gut, Dad. I scanned the note again, my legal mind dissecting it for flaws. The script was my father's, that specific apology, more sorry than you can imagine. He used it whenever guilt struck, like for a missed birthday or school event. David Miller, my husband, was not his real name. We had been together 5 years, married 3. My platinum ring caught the fading sun. My entire world was a deception. A buzz from my phone shattered the quiet, making me flinch. I snatched it without a second thought. Mom, are you there? It went to voicemail. Her familiar Texas accent asked me to leave a message. She did not pick up. My thumb had dialed her number on pure instinct. Mom, it is me, I managed to say after the tone, keeping my voice even. I need you to call me. This is an emergency. I stopped, not knowing what else I could safely add. Please. I ended the call and dialed again, but it went straight to her messages. My mother always picked up, especially on a day like this, unless her phone was broken or worse. A shape moved in my rearview mirror. A tall man was crossing the lot, a phone to his ear, looking into cars. It was David. My throat went dry. He was searching for me, about 50 yards out, peering inside every car. I sank down in my seat, my heart pounding. My Honda was a common silver color, but he would recognize the license plate or the sticker for my law firm on the rear window. He started walking my way. 30 seconds. I remembered the rear exit, the service road. An instinct had told me to find a second way out. I shifted into drive with the lights off and moved slowly, hiding behind the other vehicles. The sound of my engine made David look up, but two other cars were heading for the main gate. I drove the other way. David started running, his phone still glued to his ear. I sped up as soon as I was past the tombstones. Tree limbs scratched the paint, rocks flew up from the tires. Then I passed through the open gate and onto a silent neighborhood road. I made a right turn, then a left at the next street, needing space and corners between us. I finally turned on my lights and took a breath. My phone started ringing. It was David. I ignored the call. It went to voicemail. It rang again, then again, and again. After the fourth try, I placed its screen down and concentrated on the road. I grew up in Austin. I knew these side streets and could lose him if I had to. The ringing ended. The car was quiet. Then a text message arrived. I knew I should not look, but I checked it at a stoplight. Emma, please, you must be so confused. I can make it all clear. Just come back home. I love you. A second message came right after. We have to discuss the baby. My world spun more than when Vincent told me the coffin was empty. The baby. I took a pregnancy test 3 days before. It was positive. Two pink lines had brought tears of joy to my eyes in our bathroom while David was at work. I put the test in my handbag, waiting to tell him after the service. No one else knew. Not my mom, not Sarah, my closest friend, not even my doctor, just me and the plastic test. So how did David find out? The light changed to green. A car horn blared behind me. I drove without thinking. Our home. Did he go through my handbag? No. The test was in my glove compartment, wrapped inside a store receipt, unless he had looked through my car as well, unless he had been looking through everything, searching for what? Information. Something to use against me. My father's words came back to me. He was placed in your life to ruin me by hurting the one thing I love most. The phone vibrated with another call. I did not check it this time. I headed for South Congress Avenue, driving to Unit 20 toward a truth that would change my life forever. The storage facility was 10 minutes from my location. My husband was somewhere in the fading Austin light, chasing me, and he knew I was expecting a child. The real question was not how he knew, it was how long had he been aware of it, and what other secrets was he keeping. 30 minutes of driving across Austin led me to a high fence and bright orange doors. Lonia Storage covered a huge property off South Congress. Rows of metal buildings glowed under newly lit security lamps in the growing dark. The area was very still. The nearby shops were already shut down for the night. A few cars were in the lot. I could not tell if they were for other renters or for the person I was meeting. I stopped my car by the main office, the engine making soft ticking sounds as it cooled. I reached for the door when a knock on the glass made me flinch. My heart leaped into my throat. A man was standing there. He was in his early 40s and wore a dark suit, which was odd in the Texas warmth. His hands were in plain sight. He showed me a leather wallet with a badge that shone in the lamplight. I lowered my window just a little. Emma Martinez. His voice was steady and official. I am Agent Michael Carter with the FBI. Your father sent me to find you here. I stayed still. Fake badges were easy to get on the internet. He knew you would require some proof, Carter added. He did not seem bothered that I was suspicious. He mentioned when you were 8 years old, you talked him into adopting a dog with only 3 legs from the animal shelter. Her name was Lucky. She was with you for another 6 years. I could not breathe. Only my family knew about Lucky. We never shared photos of her. This was long before everyone used social media. I was 14 when she passed away, and I remember crying for a whole week. I got out of the car on wobbly legs. How is he? The words escaped me. He is alive and he is expecting you, Carter said. He pointed to the rear of the property. Unit 20 is this way. I have been watching the area since your father called me about the key. You were not followed here. Are you certain? As certain as possible. He began to walk and I followed him. We will be sure after we get you inside and check for any listening or tracking bugs. I froze in place. Tracking devices? Carter's face was serious. Your father can give you the details, but Emma, you must realize that David's employers are very advanced. If they chose to watch you or record you, they possess the tools to do so. My hand moved on its own to my shoulder. It touched the place I received a vitamin injection 2 years ago. David was the one who pushed for it. He said I seemed tired, that B12 would give me more energy. Could that have been it? Let us go, Carter said in a low voice. Your father has waited 20 years for this conversation. We should not keep him waiting. We passed by lines of orange garage doors with black numbers painted on them. The area was bright but strangely silent, our shoes echoing on the pavement. Cameras on buildings and poles followed us as we moved. Unit 20 was in the back, mostly blocked from view by a bigger building. A clever location, I thought. This unit was not visible from the front gate. I took out the key Vincent gave me. My hands trembled so much I almost let it fall. There is no rush, Carter said. I put the key into the lock. It moved without effort and the lock made a soft click. I raised the metal door. The room was not a normal storage unit. One wall was filled with screens showing video from many places. I saw the storage place and also streets I did not know. Another wall was covered in maps of Austin and the nearby towns with colored markers on them. A small bed was in a corner near a little fridge. Boxes of files were piled up against the far wall, and right in the middle, standing up from a simple chair, was my dad, Richard Martinez. He was 64 years old. He was the man whose funeral I had attended this afternoon, and he was alive. My legs gave out from under me. I grabbed the door frame to keep from falling. My vision focused only on his face. He looked older and more worn out than I recalled, but it was definitely him. Emma, he said, his voice cracking. I was unable to talk or even take a breath. I could not understand what was happening. He moved closer, with his hands held out like he was calming a frightened animal. I know this must be. You are dead, I choked out. I was at the funeral home yesterday. I put a kiss on your forehead. That was not me. Guilt washed over my father's face. It was a realistic model, a dummy made of silicone. The FBI has people who make these for witness protection. It had the same height and weight, with a face made to look just like me. The funeral director was paid a lot of money to keep the coffin mostly shut and the lights low. Paid by who? The FBI, Carter answered from behind me. It was all part of your father's protection plan. This is how it is done for witnesses in great danger. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. This was unbelievable. Normal people do not pretend to die. You cannot just borrow a body for a funeral. Federal agents do not create fake memorial services. But it seemed that they did. Please have a seat, my dad said, pointing to another chair. There are things I must explain that will be difficult to accept, things I should have told you a long time ago. Mom, I was finally able to say. Where is she? She will not answer her phone. My father's look of guilt turned into one of pure anguish. That is what I have to tell you. He walked to the screens and showed a video that had been recorded hours before. It showed the parking area on my parents' road, a black sport utility vehicle. Two men got out. My mother got out of her own car after the service. One man held a cloth to her face. She fell to the ground and they quickly put her inside their vehicle. The video showed the time was 4:17 p.m. That was 3 hours and 43 minutes ago. No. The word was a whisper. No, no, no. They kidnapped her to get to you, my father said, his voice strained. They figured out the funeral was a lie. They know I am not dead, and they know that I will do anything for you and your mother. I was frozen, my eyes locked on the monitor. I watched my mother's unconscious body vanish into a dark vehicle. Who? I whispered, my voice barely there. Who are they? My father's face turned to stone. That is a long story. It began 20 years ago when I was a detective for the Austin police. I made a choice that led to a very dangerous man's son dying. Carter stepped forward. Emma, I know this is overwhelming, but we have a very small window of time to get your mother back safely. Your father has been working with us for months and we have a plan, but you need to understand exactly what we are facing. I looked at my dad, at a face that held 2 decades of secrets. Tell me everything, I said. He gave a slow, heavy nod. It begins with a man named Marcus Vulov and it ends with your husband. I sat across from my dad in that small room while 15 years of secrets poured out of him. Carter stood by the monitors with his arms crossed, watching both of us. Dad leaned forward on his chair, putting his elbows on his knees. He clasped his hands so tightly that his knuckles were white. The year was 2009, he began. I was a detective with Austin Police working on organized crime. We had been building a case against the Volkov family for 3 years, mostly for money laundering. Millions of dollars were moving through legitimate businesses like car washes, restaurants, and storage places like this one. His eyes glanced at the concrete walls around us. I wondered if he chose this location deliberately, if Marcus Vulov had owned places just like this. Marcus Vulov was the head of the whole operation, Dad said. He was 60 years old then, a former Soviet military man, ruthless but also smart. He protected himself with layers of people between him and the actual crimes. We could not touch him. So, you went after his son, I said quietly. My father's jaw tightened. We went after the operation. Alexander Volkov, Marcus's oldest son, was 19 years old. He was running one of the fronts, a car dealership. We had evidence he was signing off on fake sales, washing money through the cars. We served the warrant on a Friday morning, May 15th, 2009. My dad's voice had become flat, the way police officers talk when they are reciting a report they have made dozens of times. There were 6 of us. I was the lead detective. We announced ourselves and entered through the main office. He stopped and swallowed hard. Alexander was in the back office. He had a 9mm Glock. When we came through the door, he fired first. 3 shots. One of them hit my partner in the shoulder. You returned fire, I said. 1 shot, Dad's voice cracked. Center mass. He died before the paramedics arrived. The room was silent except for the hum of the monitors. The shooting was ruled justified, Carter said from his spot by the wall. Internal Affairs investigated for 6 weeks. Every witness confirmed Alexander fired first. Your father saved his partner's life. But Marcus did not see it that way, I said. Marcus Vulov lost his firstborn son. My dad's face twisted in pain. I understand that. I have a daughter. I know what that kind of loss does to a person. He wanted revenge. Not right away. That is what made it so dangerous. Dad stood and began pacing in the tiny space. After Alexander died, Marcus disappeared. Most of his operations went underground. His younger son David was 21 at the time, a student at the university. He had a clean record, no connection to the family business that we could find. My stomach dropped. David was a business major, a junior. Dad pulled a file from one of the boxes and handed it to me. A university ID photo stared up at me. It was David, 15 years younger with longer hair, but it was unmistakably him. 3 months after his brother died, David disappeared, Dad said. He withdrew from school and cut ties with everyone he knew. We assumed he had gone underground with his father. I stared at the photo. The man I had married, 21 years old, grieving his brother, about to spend the next decade being molded into a weapon. Where did he go? Eastern Europe, Carter said. We have pieced some of it together. Moscow, Prague, Budapest. Marcus had connections from his Soviet military days. We think he was training David, not just physical training, but psychological conditioning. How to build a cover identity, how to infiltrate someone's life, and how to make them trust you completely. For 12 years, I whispered. 12 years, Dad confirmed. And then 5 years ago, you walked into that coffee shop on West 6th Street. The memory hit me like a physical blow. The barista had gotten my order wrong and given me someone else's latte. David had been sitting nearby and noticed the confusion. He offered to trade drinks since mine was actually his order. We had laughed about it and talked for 20 minutes. He had asked for my number. It had felt like fate. That was not an accident, I said. Nothing about your relationship with David was an accident. Dad's voice was rough. When you two started dating, I ran a background check. David Miller, an Austin native, worked in commercial real estate, had clean credit and no criminal record. It all seemed legitimate, but it was not. The identity was perfect. A birth certificate, a social security number, and employment history. All were real documents, all properly filed, but they were fabricated. Someone with serious resources had created an entire life history for him. When did you know? I suspected something was wrong about 3 years ago, right before your wedding. Some of the details did not add up. David's supposed childhood home had been torn down decades before his birth year. His elementary school had no records of him, but I could not prove anything, and you were so happy. Dad's voice broke. I told myself I was being paranoid, that not every inconsistency means there is a conspiracy. But you kept digging. I hired private investigators. They found more gaps and more impossible things in David's backstory, but nothing that definitively connected him to the Vulovs. It was not until 8 months ago that Carter's team made the breakthrough. Carter stepped forward. We had been tracking Marcus Vulov's financial network for years. One of our analysts noticed payments to a document forger in San Antonio. When we pressured the forger, he gave up a client, David Miller. From there, we pulled surveillance footage and ran facial recognition against David Volkov's old photos. But we made a critical error. Carter admitted, his jaw tight. We focused our surveillance on David, specifically his movements, his communications, and his daily patterns. We assumed if Marcus made a move, it would be through David. We did not realize Marcus had a separate operational team, his own enforcers. David does not even know about them. They are legacy contacts from the Soviet era who answer only to Marcus directly. Dad's face twisted with guilt. That is how they got to Linda. The men who took her were not part of David's network. They were Marcus's direct operatives, bypassing David entirely. By the time our surveillance flagged the black SUVs, your mother was already gone. A 98% match, Dad said. David Miller and David Volkov are the same person. The world tilted again. I thought I had absorbed the shock, but this proof, this certainty, made it real in a way the letter had not. Why did you not tell me 8 months ago when you knew? Because we did not know his orders. Dad crouched in front of my chair, forcing me to meet his eyes. Was he under orders to kill you, to kidnap you, or to destroy your life slowly from the inside? We did not know. And if we confronted him, if we arrested him, Marcus would just send someone else, someone we would not see coming. So you watched, I said bitterly. You let me keep living with him, sleeping next to him. We had agents watching your house around the clock, Carter interrupted, monitoring phone lines and tracking David's movements. The moment he made a move toward violence, we were ready to intervene. But he never did, Dad said softly. For 8 months, David went to work, came home, and had dinner with you, like a normal husband. That is what scared me most. Why? Because Marcus Vulov is patient. He spent 12 years preparing David for this. He is not going to rush the payoff. Dad's hands were shaking. He wants me to suffer the way he suffered. He wants me to watch my daughter destroyed from the inside, betrayed by someone she loves, carrying the child of the man who is going to. He could not finish the sentence. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over. The baby? How does David know about the baby? Dad and Carter exchanged a look. We think your home is bugged, Carter said. Audio surveillance, possibly video, and maybe a tracker on your person. We will know more once we scan you properly. My hand went to my shoulder again, to that injection site. Marcus decided to destroy my daughter from the inside, Dad said, his voice breaking completely, using my son-in-law. Carter pulled up files documenting 5 years of my life in cold detail. One of the monitors came alive with folders organized by year. There were photos, dates, and locations. My entire relationship with David was laid out like evidence at a trial, which I suppose it was. This is what we have compiled over the past 8 months, Carter said, clicking through images. Most of it came from surveillance we initiated once we identified David, but some of it, the early stuff, came from Vulov's own records. Marcus was documenting it, I said numbly. He wanted proof. He wanted to be able to show your father exactly how he had orchestrated your destruction. Carter's voice was clinical, but I caught the anger underneath. This was never just about killing you, Emma. It was about humiliation. It was about making Richard watch helplessly while his daughter fell in love with the enemy. The first photo showed the coffee shop on West 6th Street, David and me laughing over the switched drinks. The timestamp read 5 years, 2 months, and 6 days ago. That was not an accident, Carter said. The barista was paid $500 to deliberately mix up your order. David was positioned at that specific table because Marcus's people had been tracking your routine for 6 weeks. They knew you came to this exact spot every Tuesday. The thought made my stomach churn. For 6 weeks, they orchestrated the entire meeting to feel completely random. Carter showed the next photo, a bookstore. It showed David and me grabbing for the same novel, a thriller I no longer recall. 2 weeks later, they made sure that book was there. David already owned a copy he had never even opened. The next image was a restaurant. David was down on one knee. I was crying, overcome with joy. He held an open ring box. A proposal, I whispered, paid for by Marcus Vulov. That ring was $14,000, purchased with dirty money. Every single moment I had cherished was now completely spoiled. It was all part of a 15-year plot for revenge. Your house has had listening devices for roughly 2 years, Carter continued, saying. We think the bugs were placed on a weekend you visited your parents. David stayed behind, claiming he had to work. A professional team came in and installed the devices. They were in the bedroom, the living room, and the home office. We did not know about the installation then, Carter added. We had not started watching David yet. That was before we knew who he really was. When we began our surveillance 8 months ago, we watched his public movements and his calls. The bugs in your home were passive. They only recorded when they heard specific keywords. They did not create enough signal for our systems to notice until it was too late. They have been listening. My own voice felt foreign to me for 2 years. Not all the time, he clarified. The devices are activated by triggers. Certain words like your father's name, FBI, police, or testify. When you said those words, the device would record a 60-second clip. Then it would send it over a secure cellular network. That is how David found out about the baby. I had used the test in our bathroom and whispered the word positive to myself. The device had picked it up. Your wedding, my dad said quietly. He had been quiet through all of this, letting Carter show me the proof, show her the wedding photos. Carter displayed a picture from 3 years ago. I was in my white dress, glowing with all our guests around me. 12 people in this photograph are tied to Marcus Volkov's crew, Carter said. He circled their faces one by one in red. They were introduced as David's co-workers, old friends from college, or distant relatives. But they are actually money launderers, enforcers, and even one man suspected of murder. I danced with them, I hugged them, I mailed them thank you notes. The worst part, Carter continued, showing me a medical file, is this. It was from a clinic I had never seen, but my name was on it. The date was 2 years and 1 month ago. A vitamin B12 injection, I recalled. My hand touched my left shoulder without thinking. David said I seemed tired and that the shot would boost my energy. Do you recall the clinic? It was some urgent care facility. David scheduled it and drove me. The memory now felt dirty. The nurse hardly looked at me. It was a fast shot and we were gone in 10 minutes. That clinic is owned by a fake company that connects back to Vulov, Carter explained. The nurse received $20,000. He took out a small handheld scanner from a case. We need to check you if my guess about that injection is correct. He did not need to explain further. I stood up, took off my jacket, and moved my shirt collar to show my left shoulder. The injection spot healed in a week and left no scar. I had completely forgotten about it. Carter moved the scanner over my shoulder. At first there was nothing, then it started beeping. The sound was high and urgent. His expression turned serious. I found it. Found what? He asked. He showed me another screen with an image. A tiny object about the size of a rice grain was a bright spot under my skin. It was about an inch deep, right where the shot was given. A buyout tracker, Carter said. It is military-grade GPS. It is accurate within 3 feet and can also transmit audio. The outside is ceramic, so it does not trigger metal detectors. It is powered by your own body heat. The battery life is almost endless as long as you are alive. The room felt like it was spinning. I held onto the table to stay steady. They implanted a tracking device inside my body. 2 years ago, Dad said, his voice cracking. For 2 years, they knew every place you went and every person you met. Bile burned in my throat. I stumbled to the trash can just in time to get sick. My body was rejecting the horrible truth. Someone, probably Dad, held my hair back from my face. A water bottle appeared in my hand. I rinsed my mouth and spat. Every private moment with David, every shower, every doctor visit, every late night talk with my best friend. They were always listening, watching, and recording. I had a surveillance device inside me for 2 years. We can take it out, Carter offered. We have a surgeon we trust just 15 minutes away. It is a 5-minute procedure with local anesthetic. I stood up straight and wiped my mouth. Not yet. Both of them stared at me. If you take it out, they will know we are on to them, I explained. My lawyer instincts were finally taking over. Right now, David assumes I went home or to my mother's house. If that tracker suddenly stops working, Marcus will figure out I am here with you. Emma, show me everything you have. I cut him off, turning to Carter. I want every file, every tape, every picture. If I am going to bring him down, I have to know who I really married. Carter looked at my dad. You are not bringing anyone down, Dad said firmly. You are going to a safe place while Carter's team takes care of this. No! My voice was stronger than I expected. Marcus stole 5 years of my life from me. He put a bug inside my body. He is using my mom as a hostage. I looked straight into my dad's eyes. I am not going to hide. I am going to fight. The computer screens glowed behind us, showing 5 years of lies. Show me all of it, I said again. After a tense moment, Carter gave a nod and opened a new file. When my phone rang, showing Mom's face, everyone in the room became silent. I had left it on the table while Carter showed me financial records and logs. We had been digging through David's fake life for 45 minutes. Every new piece of information was like another stab to my heart. Then the phone started to buzz against the metal table. The sound made us all freeze. Mom's picture lit up the screen. It was the photo from last Christmas. She was laughing by the tree we had decorated. Do not pick it up, Dad warned. But Carter raised a hand to stop him. Hold on, this could be important. He grabbed a cable and plugged it into his computer. Emma, answer the call. Use the speaker, but let me analyze the feed first. My hand was shaking as I grabbed the phone. It was a video call, not just audio. I answered it and pointed the screen so Carter could see. My mother's face appeared on the display. She looked happy. That was the first detail that felt completely wrong. Mom had just been at Dad's funeral service this afternoon. She had been devastated. She was leaning on my aunt just to stand up. She should not have been smiling. Emma, darling, Mom's voice sounded so warm. Thank goodness I have been trying to call you. Mom, I managed to say. Where are you? Are you safe? I am perfectly fine, honey. I am over at Margaret's. You know our neighbor, 3 houses down. After the service, I just could not stand to be in the house alone, so Margaret said I should stay with her tonight. Mom smiled even wider. But David has been calling, so worried about you. He told me you left the cemetery and did not tell anyone where you went. Carter was typing furiously as his programs analyzed the video. Why did you not answer your phone? I asked her, studying her face. I called you right after the service. Oh dear, my phone ran out of battery. You know how I am about charging it. Margaret let me use hers. Mom moved a little closer to her camera. Emma, please just go back home. David loves you very much. Whatever is wrong, whatever argument you had, just go home and speak with him. We did not have a fight, I told her slowly. Well, he seems to believe you are mad about something. He is at home waiting for you. My mother's face looked like she was begging me, please go home, sweetheart. Go to David. Everything will be all right. David, not your husband or that husband of yours. She always called him that with a little joke in her voice. Just David. My mother had never, not one time in 5 years, just called him David. Carter's computer screen flashed an alert, but I was already setting my own trap. Mom, I asked, keeping my voice level, do you remember what we ate for breakfast yesterday before the funeral? There was a pause. It was less than a second, but it was there. Of course, dear, we had those wonderful pancakes you made. A cold feeling spread through me. We did not have breakfast together yesterday. I was at my house by myself, too sick with sadness to eat. Mom was at her home with my dad's sister. There were no pancakes. Mom, what was I wearing? I asked. Another tiny pause. Your black dress, sweetheart. The one that has the pearl buttons. I had worn a navy blue suit. It had no pearls. Carter's laptop now had a red box around my mom's face. Text scrolled next to it. It read, Deep fake detected. Facial mapping shows 94% AI generation. Voice is synthesized. Small facial expressions are absent. Recommendation, video is not authentic. I looked at the screen at my mother's smiling face telling me to go home to David. Emma, the fake mom said, her head tilted. Are you still there? I think the connection is. I hung up. The phone dropped onto the table from my hand. I could not hold it anymore. My hands were trembling too much to hold the phone. That was not her, I whispered. That was not my mother. Carter's voice was heavy. No, he confirmed, typing quickly as he ran searches. That was an AI generated deepfake. They likely made it from photos and videos they found on your social media, family movies, any digital trail. The technology is so advanced now they can make it interactive and respond in real time. The voice sounds almost perfect. My dad added, almost but not quite. They could not fake the small details. They did not know about breakfast or what you wore. They were trying to get you to go home, Carter said, his eyes glued to the screen. They wanted you back at your house where David is waiting, where they are in complete control. He suddenly stopped typing and became very still. What is it? I asked. Carter looked up, his face pale in the blue light from the monitors. Emma, the call came from your home address. He spun the laptop around to face me. I saw a map with a red pin marking my street, my own house number. It came from inside your house. They are not just watching you anymore, they are there right now. The room felt like it was spinning. The men working for Marcus Volkov were inside my home. It was the house where David and I had lived for 2 years. The house where we cooked, watched movies, fell in love, and talked about having a family. It was where I took that pregnancy test 3 days ago and whispered positive to myself in the bathroom. Now they were in that private space using a fake version of my mother's face to trick me into a trap. How many are there? I asked. Carter brought up a new screen. Thermal imaging from a street camera half a block away shows at least 3 heat signatures inside your house. There could be more where the camera can't see. My dad spoke. 3 armed men waiting for you. I pictured myself walking through that door, not suspecting a thing, calling out for David. Maybe I would sense something was wrong, or maybe not. Would they grab me right away? Or would David try to act normal first, to make me feel safe? How did Marcus plan for me to die? We have to move, Carter said, already gathering his equipment. If they are at your house and you are not following the deepfake's instructions, they will know you are aware of them. They might move to a new location, change their plans, or, I finished his sentence, come to find me here. This storage facility is secure, but we cannot take any risks, Carter told my dad. Richard grabbed the emergency bag. Emma, we must take you to a federal safe house immediately. But I just stared at my phone at the blank screen where my mother's fake face had been just moments before. They had stolen my mom's image, her voice, and her personality. They turned her into a puppet to lead me to my death, and my real mother, Linda Martinez, was still their prisoner somewhere. No, I said. Both men stopped and looked at me. I am not running. I stood up, making my legs hold me steady. They are in my house. They have my mom, and David is out there, probably directing this whole thing. I looked directly at Carter. You told me you had a plan to rescue my mom. I want to hear it. My voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. They tried to use my mother's face to kill me. I want to hear the plan right now. After a few seconds, Carter finally nodded. All right, he said, but you are not going to like it. Dad showed me a photograph that made everything much more complicated. Before we talk about the plan, he said quietly, you need to know something about David, about who he was before Marcus turned him into this. The picture filled the screen. It was a young man, about 19 years old, smiling for the camera. He had dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes I knew instantly. I had looked into those same eyes 1,000 times over dinner and in the morning sun. Alexander Volkov, David's older brother. He looks just like him, I whispered. Same eyes, my dad confirmed, and the same smile when David actually smiles. Alexander was the oldest son, and he was Marcus's pride. Carter displayed a second picture. It showed Alexander in a University of Texas Longhorns jersey, with his arm around a young woman at a football game. He looked happy and normal, like any other college kid. He was a business major in his junior year, Dad said. His girlfriend's name was Sarah. He volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. My dad's voice became empty. I did not know any of that when I shot him. I only knew he was holding a gun and my partner was bleeding. Tell me exactly what happened, I said. Not the official police report, the real story. Dad was silent for a long time. May 15th, 2009, at 7:30 in the morning, we went to the car dealership with a warrant. There were 6 officers. I was the lead detective. We announced who we were and went in through the front. He stared at Alexander's picture. Alexander was in the back office. When we entered that room, he already had his Glock pointed at us. I yelled at him to drop the weapon. He fired instead. Carter added, 3 shots. One bullet hit Detective Marcus Webb in the shoulder, the other 2 missed. I fired back, 1 shot. My dad's hands were shaking. Center mass, he fell to the floor. We called for paramedics and tried to stop the bleeding, but the bullet had hit his aorta. He died right there in that office before the ambulance could get there. The only sound in the room was the hum of the computers. He was 19 years old, Dad said. A scared kid pretending to be a gangster for his father. If he had just dropped the gun, he would be alive. He would be 34 now. He might be married with children. My age, the same age David would be. And Marcus blamed you, I said. Marcus blamed me for doing my duty. Internal Affairs conducted an investigation that lasted 6 weeks. Every single witness confirmed that Alexander fired his weapon first. The shooting was officially ruled as justified. But to Marcus, Dad's voice cracked, to Marcus, I murdered his son. Carter stepped closer. After Alexander died, David vanished. He was a 21-year-old student at the University of Texas with a perfect record. We assumed he had gone into hiding with his father. We were mistaken. Marcus sent him to Europe. For 12 years, I said, remembering what they told me earlier. 12 years of training, Carter confirmed. We have put some of the pieces together from our sources: Moscow, Prague, Budapest. Marcus had connections from his time in the old Soviet military. We believe he was conditioning David. It was not just physical combat training, but also psychological programming. He taught him how to create a fake identity, how to get close to someone, and how to make them trust you. Exactly, how to become a living weapon, Dad said softly. The reality of it all hit me hard. David, at 21, grieving for his brother, was shaped by his father into a tool for revenge. For 12 years, he went from a college student to a trained killer, all to serve his father's vendetta. But this is what you must understand, Carter said, opening another file. In the 6 months since we confirmed David's identity, we have been watching him very carefully. And Emma, David has had at least 3 perfect chances to kill you. Opportunities where you were alone and helpless, where he could have made it look like an accident. My stomach tightened. 3? 4 weeks ago, you went jogging in Zilka Park at 6 in the morning by yourself. David knew your running path. He could have followed you, attacked you on a quiet trail, and made it look like a random crime. Carter switched to another document. 2 months ago, the brake line on your car had a slow leak. You took it to a mechanic. We reviewed the security videos. David was in the garage the night before holding tools. He could have cut the line completely. Instead, he only damaged it enough for you to notice and get it fixed. And 3 months ago, Dad added, his voice strained, You had that bad stomach flu. David made you soup and gave you medicine. Carter's team later tested the medicine bottles. They found nothing. If he had wanted to poison you, that was his perfect opportunity. I stared at them in disbelief. He was under orders to kill me, and he did not do it. 3 separate times, Carter confirmed, and maybe more that we did not see. David has been living with you for 5 years and married to you for 3. He has had endless opportunities, but he has never taken them. The question is, why? We do not know for sure, Carter admitted, but we do have a theory. He opened an audio file. This recording is from 3 years ago. We had planted a listening device on one of Marcus's associates. We recorded this conversation between Marcus and David. He pressed play. Marcus's cold, commanding voice with its thick Eastern European accent filled the room. You have been in position for 2 years. When will you finish your assignment? There was a pause. Then I heard David's voice, younger, but it was definitely him. Soon, I need more time. More time? Marcus's voice became cruel. I gave you 12 years. I turned you into what you are. And this is how you repay me? With hesitation? She is not what you told me she would be. She is Richard Martinez's daughter. That is all that is important. You will make him watch her die, just like I had to watch Alexander die, slowly and with much pain. You will destroy everything she loves and everyone she trusts, and then you will kill her while Richard is forced to watch. After a short silence, he added, Do this, or you are no longer my son. The recording stopped. I felt like I could not breathe. The casual cruelty in Marcus's voice was sickening. He had turned me into nothing more than a target, a game piece in his plan for revenge, and David's voice sounded so uncertain and torn. That was 3 years ago, Dad said in a gentle voice. It was right around the time David asked you to marry him. He has been delaying, I realized. For 3 years, he has been putting off his own father. Which suggests one of two things, Carter said. Either David is playing an even more complex game, or, I finished the thought for him, he actually fell in love with me. That idea should have brought me some comfort, but instead it just made everything feel worse. Because even if David did love me, he had still lied to me. He still deceived me. He married me because his father ordered him to. And now my mother was a hostage. We were in hiding, and David was out there somewhere, trapped between his father's command and whatever feelings he had for me. My father saw the look on my face and said, That does not make him safe. It makes him a bigger threat. A man with divided loyalties is a wild card. I know, I told him. But looking at Alexander's picture, at that youthful face with David's eyes, I felt the sorrow. 2 brothers, one died at 19 for pulling a trigger in panic. The other was shaped into a tool for vengeance, torn between love and his orders. Marcus Volkov ruined both of his sons, and now he was coming for me. The storage unit became a command post when the FBI team arrived. 6 agents in tactical gear entered, bringing cases and computers. The small room was soon full of people, and the air was thick with stress and the sound of radios. Carter displayed a large screen showing a building's heat signature. 2 bright orange shapes stood out against the blue. Your mother is right here, he stated, pointing to the larger one. An old meatpacking plant on East Riverside. We have been watching it for the last 2 hours. I moved closer to get a better look. She was with just one other person. No. Carter's expression hardened. Look again at that second shape. The smaller orange form was about half the size of the first one, not a grown-up. I held my breath. That is a child, yes. What child? My voice was sharper than I meant it to be. Whose child is with my mother in there? Carter showed me a document on another laptop. It was a birth certificate from the Texas Department of State Health Services. The name read Liam Alexander Volkov, born March 12, 2016. Mother, Sophia Grace Miller. Father, David Marcus Volkov. My world came to a halt. David had a son, a 7-year-old boy I never knew about. Sophia Miller passed away 3 years ago, Carter said softly. It was a car crash, a single car on a country road near San Antonio. She lost control and went into a ravine. The official report said it was an accident, but Marcus killed her. My dad finished. Once David was with Emma, Sophia became a problem. I could not take my eyes off the birth certificate. Liam Alexander Volkov. His middle name Alexander was for David's dead brother. A memory from 2 weeks ago came back to me. David had brought a shy 7-year-old boy to our house for a meal. This is Liam, David said, messing up the boy's hair. He is my friend Tom's son. You know, Tom from the real estate office. He had an emergency and asked if we could watch Liam. I was unsure. David had mentioned Tom only once or twice, and I had never met him. Sure, I had said, smiling at the quiet child. Of course, I cooked macaroni and cheese. We played a card game at the kitchen table. Liam was quiet at first but started laughing when I groaned about picking up 4 cards. He called me Miss Emma and politely thanked me for the food before David took him home. Later that evening, I asked David, "When can I finally meet this mysterious Tom?" For a split second, David froze. I almost did not notice it. "He travels a lot, working with clients overseas. I will introduce you one day." I did not ask again. Now I knew the real reason. That was David's son, his own child, and I had fed him and played with him with no idea who he was. "David brought him to your house 2 weeks ago," Carter said, confirming my thoughts. "We have it on our surveillance video." That was the only time in 5 years David ever mixed his personal life with his mission. "We believe he was trying to—" He paused for a moment. "We believe he wanted you to get to know Liam so that if Marcus ever backed him into a corner, you would fight to keep the child safe." "Where has Liam been living?" I asked. "If Sophia has been gone for 3 years, he was with a nanny in a house Marcus owns in Georgetown. He was kept isolated and homeschooled. David visited him twice a week. The nanny called in a missing person report this morning around the time of your father's funeral. Marcus had taken his own grandson, a 7-year-old boy. Why?" My voice was just a faint whisper. "Why would Marcus take his own grandson?" "As a guarantee," Carter said grimly, "to make sure David follows his orders." Marcus can tell David is hesitating and missing chances to act. The fake phone call and the men at your house were all Marcus's plans, not David's. Marcus is pushing for a final conflict because he no longer trusts his son. He brought up another image on the screen. It was a floor plan of the meat packing plant. Red X's showed different locations. "We think Marcus has given David a final demand. Kill you and Richard before sunrise at 6 a.m. That is 8 hours from now. Or Marcus will kill Liam." Carter looked straight at me. "David's own father is threatening to kill his 7-year-old son unless David kills his wife." The cruelty of it was hard to grasp. Marcus had destroyed Alexander, trained David, killed Sophia, and was now using a child to get his revenge. "So, what is our plan?" I asked, keeping my voice from shaking. "We move in just before dawn," Carter explained. "At 4 a.m., the FBI team will enter the plant, rescue your mother and the boy, and handle any threats. But first, we need something to draw Marcus's men away from them." "A distraction," I said again. My dad then spoke up. "I will do it. I will go to Marcus and tell him I am giving up. I will offer to trade myself for Linda. That will get his attention while your team gets ready." "No." The word came out firm and final. They all turned to look at me. "If you go, Dad, Marcus will kill you as soon as you arrive. Then he will kill Mom, just to be cruel." I got to my feet, trying to keep my legs from trembling. "It must be me." "Emma, no way," Dad said. "Marcus wants to see you hurt." I interrupted my dad. "He wants you to see me die. If I go in there and give myself up, he will keep me alive long enough for you to see it happen. That will give Carter's team the time they need to get inside." "You are suggesting you be the bait," Carter stated. "I am saying I am the only choice that gives us more time." I looked at my dad. "You go in, and you are dead in 30 seconds. I go in, and Marcus will make a big show of it. And while he is busy with his little performance, the FBI can get Mom and Liam out. And then what happens?" Dad's voice was filled with emotion. "Marcus kills you anyway. Then the FBI will shoot Marcus before he can," I answered with more certainty than I felt. Carter and my dad shared a long glance. "There is another problem," Carter finally said. "It is David. We are not sure where he is. He is not at your house with Marcus's men. He is not at the plant with your mother. He is out there somewhere, and we cannot predict what he will do." "That is why I have to speak with him," I replied. "Before we move forward, I must know if David will be on our side or try to kill us. And I know only one way to figure that out." I took out my phone, which had been silent for so long, the phone David had been calling over and over before we silenced it. I looked at Carter. "You can track this call, can't you? If I call him, you can locate him." In under 30 seconds, Carter said yes. "Then I am making the call." I looked at my dad, at the fear and helplessness on his face. "I have to know if Marcus completely broke David or if any part of the man I married is still there." "And if he is completely broken?" Dad asked in a low voice. "Then I will know that I am going into that plant by myself," I answered. "But at least I will know the truth." I found David's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the green button. After 5 years of marriage, of lies and being watched, I was about to have a real conversation with my husband. I pressed call. My thumb was inches away from David's name when Carter quickly reached out and stopped me. "Hold on!" His voice was sharp. "The tracking device is still on. If you call him now, Marcus will hear every word through the audio. He will know our whole plan." "Oh." I looked down at my phone, then to my shoulder where that device had been for 2 years. "We need to take it out," Carter insisted. "Right now, before you make that phone call." Agent Elena Torres came forward. She was in her mid-30s, with dark hair tied back and wore blue medical gloves. She had come with the tactical team, but I had not really noticed her until that moment. "I am the team's field medic," she said, her voice steady and professional. "I can remove the device right here. The procedure is simple," Emma said. "5 minutes with a local anesthetic, you will barely feel a thing." I asked, "How long until the anesthetic works?" "2 minutes for the shot, 3 more to get completely numb." We did not have 5 minutes. I turned to Carter. "How close are those vehicles you mentioned?" His expression became tense. "We are not sure exactly how far. If Marcus is sending a team from the same place as the men at your house, they will be here in 15 to 20 minutes. There was no time for anesthetic. I took off my jacket and moved my shirt collar, showing my left shoulder. "Just get it out, Emma." "That is not a good idea." I cut Torres off. "Do it right now. If you do not, I will call David with the tracker still inside me, and Marcus will hear every word." Torres glanced at Carter, who gave a slight nod. She arranged sterile tools on a metal tray: a scalpel, forceps, gauze, and antiseptic. Her efficient motions were almost more frightening than the sharp blade. "Dad," I said, my voice firmer than I had ever heard it. "Come over here. Stand where you can see." He reluctantly came closer, his face already white. "I need you to watch this," I told him. "I want you to see the true cost of your decisions, not as an idea, but for real. I want you to see what they did to me," Emma said, watching. Torres wiped my shoulder with a cold, stinging liquid. The chemical smell made my nose burn. "This will hurt," she said softly. "The chip is about an inch deep under the muscle." She promised to be fast, but told me the pain was unavoidable. "Just do it," I said. The knife cut into my skin. I thought I was ready. I was wrong. The pain was instant and sharp, a deep wrongness that blurred my sight. This was not an accident. This was someone cutting me open to take out something that never belonged there. My dad gasped, a sound like a choked sob. I clenched my teeth and forced the words out. "Keep watching." Torres moved with quick, steady hands. I felt a pulling pressure, the feeling of something shifting beneath my skin. Warm blood trickled down my arm. "Almost there," Torres whispered. Then, a tiny click of metal hitting ceramic as the tool closed on the chip. "Got it." She pulled it free, and I finally looked. It was like a grain of rice, smaller than my little fingernail. The casing was a dark, harmless-looking blue, now slick with my blood. 2 years. That object had been inside my body for 2 years. Torres pressed a clean cloth on the cut, applying firm pressure. "It is a shallow cut, a clean removal. You missed any major arteries. You will need stitches later, but this will work for now." She taped a bandage around my shoulder and handed me my jacket. A flash of bright pain shot through me when I put it on. Carter held the chip with a tool, looking at it through a magnifying glass. "It is a military bio-tracker, GPS that is accurate to 3 feet, plus it can send bursts of audio." He pointed to a tiny part. "Voice-activated recording. The trigger words were your name, FBI, and David Marcus. Every time you spoke one, it recorded 60 seconds and sent it over a secure cell signal." I repeated. "For 2 years." He confirmed it. "That is how Marcus knew you were pregnant, how he knew about our case, how he knew everything." The full weight of that betrayal felt like a heavy blanket. Every private talk, every sweet moment, every time I whispered David's name at night was recorded. Every conversation with my dad about my work, every mention of FBI cases I defended, all of it was sent and analyzed. Suddenly, alarms screamed from Carter's laptop. A tactical agent pointed at a screen showing the entrance. "Security breach." 3 black sport utility vehicles with no license plates were driving toward us. "They are 2 minutes away." Carter's voice was grim. "They are here." Marcus heard everything we just said. He knows we are FBI, he knows our plan, and he knows Emma is working with us. "He is sending a team to get rid of the problem?" The room exploded into organized action. Agents checked their guns, put on helmets, and took positions by the door. "We have to get out of here," Carter said. "Take different cars, different roads. Emma, you come with me." "No." I picked up the tracking chip from the tray. It was still covered in my blood. I held it up. "I am keeping this." Everyone froze. "Emma, that is evidence." "It is a weapon," I corrected him. "Marcus believes it is still inside me. He thinks he can still follow me, still hear me. That gives us an edge." "Or it gets you killed," my dad said, his voice shaking. "Emma, please. You have been through so much already." "This is my choice," I cut him off, closing my hand around the chip. My blood made it slippery, but my grip was firm. "Not yours and not the FBI's, it is mine." I looked right at Carter. I am going to that meatpacking plant tonight, and I am bringing this with me so Marcus will think he knows exactly where I am and what I am saying. My dad said, "That is crazy. If you go there with or without that chip, Marcus will gloat," I finished for him. "He will want to put on a show. He will want to make you watch. Is that not what you said? He wants you to hurt." I met my dad's gaze. So let's give him just what he wants. Me walking in there alone, thinking I am being tracked, thinking I am defeated. And while he is busy having his moment of victory, your FBI team can get Mom and Liam out. Carter stared at me for a long time. You know that even with a surprise attack, even with a tactical team, you have a very high chance of not making it out alive. I know. And you are still volunteering for this? I am not volunteering, I said. I am choosing. There is a difference. The alarms were still screaming. The vehicles would be there in under a minute. "We have to go," one agent said. "Now." I held up my phone. David's name was still on the screen. I looked at Carter. "Call him," I ordered. "Call him right now before those cars get here. I need to know if he plans to help me or to kill me." Carter grabbed a small tracking device and gave a short nod. I hit the call button. The phone rang one time, then two. On the third ring, David answered. "Emma!" His voice was choked and frantic. "Emma, where are you? I have been trying to call you for hours. I know that you know. I know you know it all." Everyone in the unit went quiet as David's voice came through the speakers. Carter had connected the call to the team's headsets, making it loud enough for all of us to hear. 6 FBI agents, my father and me, all of us were listening to my husband's panicked breathing. "Emma," he said my name like he was praying. "Where are you? Please, just tell me you are safe." I made my voice sound cold and professional. "I am in a place you cannot find me. And I know everything, David. I know about Marcus. I know about Alexander. I know what they sent you to do." There was a long silence. Then he spoke. "I know you do. I knew it the second you walked away from the cemetery without me. The tracker stopped sending your talks an hour ago. They took it out, did they not?" So he was listening too, or Marcus was listening through him. "Tell me about Liam," I said. I kept my voice perfectly level even as my heart was shattering. "Your 7-year-old son, the one you said was your friend Tom's kid 2 weeks ago." David's breathing stuttered. When he spoke, his voice was broken. "I brought him to you because I was trying to save him. I thought if you met him, if you came to love him like I knew you would, then when it all came crashing down, you would fight for him." "When it all came crashing down," I repeated. "You mean when you finally murdered me?" "No, when I finally found a way to keep you both safe." His voice broke completely. "Emma, I could not do it. For 6 months, I have been looking for a way out of this. 6 months of finding excuses, of delaying, of lying to Marcus that I just needed more time, that it was not the right moment," he added. And he knew. He knew I was not on his side anymore. "Because you fell in love with me," I stated softly. "Yes." There was no pause. "God forgive me. Yes, it was all supposed to be a game. Get close to you, make you trust me, then wait for the signal from Marcus. But sometime during that first year, I do not even know when it happened. It stopped being a game. By the time we were married, I was in too deep to leave, but I was too much of a coward to tell you the truth." I heard a noise from his side of the call, a child crying quietly. "Is that Liam?" I asked. "Yes." David's voice became a faint whisper. "Marcus has him. He has him and your mother at the plant. He is making me watch on a video call while he holds a gun to my son's head." My stomach felt like it was filled with ice. "Where are you?" "It does not matter. I am not with them, but Marcus made sure that I can see it all. Every time Liam cries for me, every time he asks why his papa is not coming," his voice broke again. "Marcus gave me a final choice. Kill you and your father before sunrise, or he will kill Liam. My own father is ready to murder his grandson just to make me do what he wants." I knew he was telling the truth. All of it was in his voice. The fear, the helplessness, the agony. It was all real. This was not the smooth, sure David I had known for 5 years. This was a man broken, a man forced to watch his father threaten to execute his own son. "David," I said slowly, "you said you were looking for a way out for 6 months. What was different? Why did you start 6 months ago?" There was another pause. Then he said, "That is when your father's contact at the FBI found me. Agent Carter pulled me over after one of your trials and told me he knew exactly who I was." He gave a sad laugh. "I thought he was about to arrest me, but he offered me a way out instead. Help them stop Marcus, testify against the whole group, and I would get witness protection. A new life for me and Liam, far away from all this." I glanced at Carter. He nodded to confirm it was true. But you refused the deal, I said. I could not take it, because taking it meant I had to tell you what I did. It meant I would have to see you look at me the way you must be looking at your phone right now, like I am a monster, and I could not handle that. So I kept putting it off, trying to find some impossible third way where I could rescue Liam, keep you safe, and not lose you at the same time. There is no third way, I told him. I know that now. His voice sounded empty. There never was. And now Marcus has pushed it to this, and I am out of time. I have to make a choice between the woman I love and the son I have already let down. In the background, we heard Marcus's voice. David, are you still talking on that phone? David spoke quickly. I have to go. Emma, please, wherever you are, just stay there. Do not come home. Do not go to the plant. Marcus will kill you the instant you walk inside. What if I want to come? I asked. What if I am willing to trade myself for Mom and Liam? No! The word was fierce and desperate. No, Emma, you cannot do that. The meat packing plant on East Riverside, I said, my voice strong and clear. 4 in the morning, let Marcus know I am coming by myself. Tell him I want to negotiate. Emma, you cannot, you do not get it. I get it completely. I looked at my dad, at Carter, and the tactical team gathered nearby. Tell him I will exchange myself for Mom and Liam, me for them. That is what he has always wanted, isn't it? For Richard Martinez's daughter to walk in and die in front of him. You are heading into a death trap. In that case, I should have a very good plan, I said. Marcus's voice grew louder in the background. David, end that call this instant. David whispered, I need to go, Emma. I repeated, 4 in the morning, do not be late. The call ended. The silence in Unit 20 was heavy. Everyone just stared at me. Carter was the first to speak, his voice tight with frustration. You have just made yourself a target. You gave Marcus the exact time and place to find you, and you promised him you would be alone. You handed him everything he could want. Good, I replied, putting the phone down. That is precisely what I intended. This is not some kind of game. I know it is not a game, I snapped back. It is a trap, and I am the bait. While Marcus is focused on me, your team will rescue Mom and Liam. That is the plan, right? It is what you were about to suggest before I took charge. Carter clenched his jaw. He looked at my dad, who seemed to have aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. One of the agents spoke quietly. She has a point. If we are going in, having Marcus focused on one spot gives us an advantage. She is not an advantage, Dad said, his voice trembling. She is my daughter. And Mom is your wife, I replied. And Liam is a 7-year-old boy who should not be part of this. We are past having good choices, Dad. Now we have to pick the bad choice that gets the fewest people hurt. I looked at Carter. So, tell me the plan for 4 in the morning. After a few seconds, he slowly nodded. All right, he said, but you will do exactly as I say. If you try to be a hero for even a moment, people will die. I understand. Understood. He displayed a blueprint of the meatpacking plant on a screen. This is how we are going to get your mother out, he said. And with luck, we will keep you alive too. 4 hours remained until the meeting. Carter's team was huddled over blueprints on a table, 6 agents in dark gear. My dad stood stiffly to the side while I stood there in the same blood-stained shirt from the funeral. A wire transmitter was taped to my side, and I tried not to think about the baby I was carrying. East Riverside Meatpacking, built in 1987, Carter said, pointing to the blueprint. It is a single-story building with few exits. Marcus picked it because it is isolated and hard to enter quietly. The diagram showed a complex layout of loading docks, processing areas, freezers, and overhead catwalks. A red X showed where Mom and Liam were being held. Emma will go in by herself, Carter said. She will have audio and GPS. Your only task is to keep them talking for 20 minutes. That is enough time for our snipers to get in position on the roof and for our teams to enter from the loading bay and south wall. What if Marcus checks her for a wire? An agent asked. Carter's jaw tightened. The transmitter is military grade. It is ceramic and powered by body heat. A handheld scanner will not find it. If they make her remove her clothes, he said, looking at me, you press the panic button. I nodded, my stomach feeling like a block of ice. Sergeant Rodriguez, Carter said to the sniper, a man in his late 30s with a shaved head and steady hands, you will have a thermal view of David Volov from the northwest roof. You know the rules of engagement. Rodriguez's voice was emotionless. If he points a weapon at the principal, I will take the shot. No. The word burst out of me. David would not harm me. Carter turned to me with an expression of pity. Miss Martinez, David Volov spent 5 years gaining your trust. He knows how you take your coffee. He knows your childhood fears and how you sleep. That does not make him harmless. It makes him the most dangerous person in that building. The reality of his words struck me hard. I had shared everything with David. He knew all of my weaknesses. Emma. Dad stepped toward me, his voice breaking. Let me go. Marcus is after me. This is all my fault. I will trade myself for your mother and the boy. I looked him in the eye. No, sweetheart. Marcus wants you to see me die, Dad. That is how he gets his revenge, by making you live with it, just like he has lived with Alexander's death for 15 years. Me going in there alone is the one move he will not anticipate. Carter nodded slowly. She is correct. Emma's involvement changes things. Marcus was ready for Richard, he was not ready for his daughter. My dad looked defeated, but he stepped away. Okay. Carter took a small black device from his vest. It was flat, smooth, and no bigger than a quarter. This is your panic button. The wire transmits audio on its own, but if you're in immediate danger, if you see a weapon, you squeeze this twice, quickly. That is our signal. We will breach in under 30 seconds. He placed it in my hand. I felt its firm, deliberate click, twice. Thermal scans show 2 hostages in the freezer, Carter went on, showing a laptop screen. 2 heat signals, 1 adult, 1 child, Linda Martinez and Liam Vulov. There are 4 armed hostiles there, maybe more. Marcus might not even be at the location. He often manages things from a distance. What about explosives? I asked. Carter's silence gave me the answer. Oh my God, I whispered. We will have a bomb disposal expert on standby. But Emma, if you spot any device, wires, timers, or vests, you signal us right away. Do not try to negotiate when explosives are involved. I nodded, but my hands had started to tremble. Agent Torres, the medic who had removed the tracker, stepped forward. Her face was serious but kind. Miss Martinez, I have to tell you this. You are about 6 weeks pregnant. Your blood pressure is high at 140/95. The stress from this situation, the rush of adrenaline, it creates a serious risk of miscarriage. The entire room fell silent. How serious is the risk? I asked. 20 to 30%. It is higher if you experience any physical trauma like a fall or prolonged high blood pressure. I put my hand on my stomach. There was hardly a bump yet, just a secret I had known for 2 weeks. It was the baby David somehow knew about before I had told anyone. Then I will have to make sure that nothing goes wrong, I said softly. Torres did not look convinced. Neither did my dad. Carter glanced at his watch. It gets dark at 0400 hours. Emma, you will go in your own car. Marcus will be looking for a convoy. We will stay back a half-mile behind you, with our lights off. You will park in the main lot, then walk to the south entrance. Once you are in, you are alone for 20 minutes. Then we make our move. What if David... I could not say the rest. If David Volov aims a weapon at you, Sergeant Rodriguez will eliminate the threat. I am sorry, Miss Martinez, but I cannot risk your life on the chance that a man trained by Marcus Volkov for 12 years will suddenly pick love over his own life. I wanted to protest. I wanted to believe that under all the deception and manipulation, there was still the man who held me on our wedding night and said, I wish we could stay like this forever. But I knew Carter was right. That man may have been a complete lie. I understand, I said. Carter gave me a light tactical vest lined with Kevlar. Wear this under your jacket. It might not stop a rifle, but it could save you from a handgun. I put it on, feeling its weight on my ribs, over the wire, and over the tiny life inside me. One last thing, Carter said. When you are inside, we will maintain radio silence. No communication, no chatter. We cannot risk Marcus listening in on our frequencies. You will be on your own until you give the signal. Or until 20 minutes pass, I added. Or until 20 minutes pass. I looked at my dad. His face was pale, as if he had aged 10 years in one night. I love you, I said to him. He held me tightly in his arms, and I could feel him shaking. Come back to me, he whispered. Please, Emma, just come back. I pulled away, straightened my shoulders, and looked at Carter. Let's begin. The streets were deserted as 3 FBI vehicles followed me from half a mile away. I could not see them. Carter had assured me they would be completely dark, no lights, no sounds. But I knew they were there. They were like shadows in my mirror, like ghosts moving with me. Unit 1 to Principal, Carter's voice came through the earpiece hidden in my hair. We can see you. We are keeping our distance. I did not answer. The wire would capture my voice, but I needed the quiet. I needed to clear my head. The dashboard of the Honda had a soft green light. It was 2:47 in the morning. I had 13 minutes to get to the plant, 73 minutes before the 4 a.m. deadline Marcus gave me. I drove through the quiet streets of Austin, passing places that held memories. South Congress, where David and I walked on our third date, the little coffee shop on East 6th, where we met by chance 5 years ago. It was dark now, but I could still picture him there. He was sitting by the window with his laptop, and he looked up with a shy smile when I spilled my coffee all over his table. I was so embarrassed. He just said it was okay. He was not reading anything important. That was a lie. He was reading a file about me, learning all my habits. He was planning how to slide into my life like a sickness. But I did not know that then. I just laughed, bought him a new coffee, and we talked for 2 hours. He had a perfect script for everything, from the words he chose to the angle of his head, even knowing the right moment for quiet to settle between us. I believed we were meant to be. I drove past the West Lynn bookshop where 1 year later he got down on one knee. He asked me to marry him right there between the poems and novels, his voice unsteady, the ring box shaking. Emma Martinez, you are my everything. Please be my wife. Tears streamed down my face, ruining my makeup as I covered my mouth, just nodding because words failed me. Shoppers clapped for us. A stranger snapped a picture. I shared it online, writing, I am the most fortunate woman in the world. How could I have been so foolish? Our wedding was flawless. We were married in October under sparkling lights at a hill country location. My father, in his formal uniform, gave me away while my mother wept happily in the first pew. Seeing David at the altar in his dark suit with a shy smile and tear filled eyes, I felt certain he was the one for me. I was oblivious to the three men sitting in the back, their Volkov Enterprises ink concealed by their long sleeves. I never wondered why his family was so few in number, so withdrawn, and so avoidant of cameras. Later, in our honeymoon suite, he held me close and murmured, You are too good for me. I kissed him, replying, You are perfect. He was being honest, but I failed to grasp his meaning at the time. My car came to a stop at the red light on Riverside Drive. Alone at the light, I rested a hand on my stomach. At 6 weeks, you were just a tiny group of cells, yet you were already a person, already a part of me and a part of David. What am I supposed to do with you? I whispered. How could I bring you into this world, knowing your history, knowing your father's actions? The signal changed to green, but my car remained still. I will give you a life, I promised, my voice cracking with emotion. I will choose you, no matter how difficult or painful it gets. None of this was your fault. I finally stepped on the accelerator. Just 2 weeks prior, David had shown up with Liam. He's my friend's son, he explained nonchalantly, dropping a bag filled with playthings. I'm just looking after him for a couple of days. I hope you don't mind. Liam was a reserved and watchful 7-year-old boy with his father's dark eyes and a softer, feminine face. I cooked him some macaroni and cheese, and we played a card game on the floor. He dozed off on the sofa while we watched a film, so I put a blanket over him and smoothed his hair back. From the kitchen entry, David observed us. When our eyes met, his expression was full of a deep emotion I could not identify. It could have been hope or perhaps sorrow. You would make a wonderful mother, he murmured. I just smiled and replied, Maybe one day. He looked away. It all made sense now. He was seeing me interact with his own child, a child whose existence was a secret, a child Marcus was leveraging against him. He was dreaming of another reality, a genuine one where we were a true family without any deceit, a life where his father's memory was not buried for 20 years in the ground. That reality, however, was never an option. I finally realized David was also a casualty. He was only 21 when Alexander passed away. Broken by sorrow and exposed, Marcus shaped him into a tool over 12 years of cunning and fury. Marcus taught him to despise my father, to enter my world, and to ruin me. Still, David made his own decisions. He agreed to the plan. He remained. He became my husband, embraced me, and deceived me for 5 years. Even at this moment, holding a weapon with his son's fate in the balance, he still had choices. He could have told me the truth. He could have fled. He could have picked me, but he did not. Carter, I spoke clearly. My arrival is in 10 minutes. Understood, our teams are set. Rodriguez is covering the roof. You have the green light. I made the turn onto East Riverside, entering the industrial area. The scenery was all chain link barriers, stone covered lots, and quiet, shadowy warehouses. The meatpacking facility appeared before me, a squat block of concrete with one light on above the southern door. It was 3:42 in the morning, 18 minutes ahead of schedule. That was intentional. Getting there first gave me an advantage. I was in charge, not just following Marcus's plan. It was a minor detail, but when you have very little control, every little bit counts. The phone on the seat next to me vibrated. I looked at the screen. A message from David read, I am sorry for all of it. A lump formed in my throat. I ignored the message. It vibrated again. Another text from David said, "This was never my intention." I powered the device down and put it away in my jacket. Only two black sport utility vehicles were parked by the loading area. I drove into a space about 30 yards from the south door, turned off the car, and listened to the quiet. I could see the entrance through the front glass. It was a corroded steel door with no glass, hanging partly open. "The main subject is not moving," Carter's voice came through my earpiece. "We are staying put. A 20-minute countdown begins once you are inside." I released my seatbelt. I confirmed the alert button was in my pocket. Two presses meant a 30-second response time. I was aware of the protective vest beneath my coat and the recording device secured to my side. My thoughts turned to my mother, bound to a chair, and to Liam wearing an explosive vest. I pictured my father at the command post, powerless as he watched the monitor. I thought of the new life inside me, too tiny to sense anything and too delicate to be shielded. "I am heading inside," I announced. I pushed the car door open into the chilly air before sunrise. The stones crunched as I walked. Far off, I could hear a large truck on the freeway. The southern door opened more, and David appeared in the doorway. He was a complete mess, with sunken eyes, a scruffy beard, and his body stooped from the burden of his actions. He was silent, lifting a hand with the palm facing me as if in defeat. I approached him. As I got to the entrance, he murmured, "I apologize." I met his gaze, the same gaze I once adored, the one that so resembled Alexander's in the photo my father showed me. I remained quiet. I moved by him and into the shadows. The door groaned loudly on its corroded hinges as I entered the gloom. A frigid, industrial chill met me, heavy with the scent of blood and butchered animals. Chains with steel hooks dangled from above. The concrete ground was slippery and had dark stains. "Subject is in," Carter's voice murmured in my ear. "Your mother is 40 feet in front of you. We see 3 enemies in high locations." Timer initiated, marked 20 minutes. I advanced with caution, my left hand touching the wall, my right hand ready by the alert button. The main room came into view with its conveyor systems, metal workbenches, and large saws all still and eerie. And then I saw my mom. She was seated beneath a lone halogen lamp, her hands fastened with zip ties and her mouth covered by tape. Her face was battered and puffy, her lip was split, but she was wide awake. She made a muffled noise when she noticed me, trying to warn me. I rushed over, fell to the ground, and tore the tape off her face. "Emma, this is a setup!" Suddenly, powerful lights flashed on above us. The whole facility was bathed in a brilliant white glow. I turned quickly. David was standing 15 feet from me, a pistol pointing down. His expression was tortured, with bloodshot eyes and a tight jaw. His stare was that of a man going under. "I am so sorry," he rasped. I looked up past him. A metal walkway circled the room about 30 feet high. 3 armed men in combat attire were positioned there. Their weapons were aimed at David, not at me. I heard one of them talking on a radio. "Target is here. Female subject is solo and wired." David had no power here. He was caught. Those guns would take him out if he made one wrong move. His hand was shaking. He desperately glanced from the walkway to me and back again. "Where is the boy?" I demanded. David's eyes moved to the far corner of the room. I looked where he was looking. A little boy was huddled behind some wooden pallets, hugging his knees and covering his ears as he swayed. "Liam!" He was making a soft, steady humming noise. It was the kind of sound a scared child makes to block out the world. He was wearing the army-style backpack that was probably armed. "Oh God!" I breathed. "Emma!" my mother cried out. "Look under my seat." I glanced down. Taped firmly to the chair's legs was a gray explosive device with wires, a pressure plate, and a digital display that was currently off. "It is a bomb," Mom stated softly. "If I get up, it will detonate. The trigger is set for 5 pounds. I weigh 140. My insides turned to ice. "Liam's bag is the same," David added, his voice strained. "It has a pressure switch. If it comes off his back—" He trailed off. I made myself take a breath and think strategically. Find an advantage. "Release them," I told David. "Take me instead. I am the one Marcus is after." David just shook his head in despair. "He is after all of us. He wants your father to see it happen." A giant television screen on the opposite wall lit up. It showed Marcus Vulov, a man in his mid-50s with graying hair and a costly suit. He was in a library with wooden walls, leather furniture, and a glass of whiskey. He was in a secure, distant location. His smile was chillingly precise. "Miss Martinez," his voice was silky, "I appreciate you joining us." I looked directly at the camera. Release my mother and the boy. Your fight is with my father. Marcus laughed softly. Do you believe you are in a position to bargain? You are not in charge of this discussion, Miss Martinez. He leaned closer to the camera. You are the payment. I kept my tone even. Are the bombs on my mother and Liam actually live? Marcus's grin grew larger. Is that important? You think they are live. David thinks they are live. Apprehension is a much more refined tool than C4, Miss Martinez. An actual explosive just takes a life. But the idea of an explosive causes helplessness and panic. It makes people choose unthinkable things. He slowly drank some of his whiskey. And I am not some monster. I have no interest in killing children with bombs. My goal is to have your father witness your death by the man you cherish. Bombs lack a certain style. So what is your demand? I demand that Richard Martinez experiences the same pain I did 15 years ago. I need him to see his own child die. I want that memory to haunt him every single day. He must learn that justice is not about a badge or a jury. It is paid with blood for blood. The official report called Alexander's death justified. Marcus spoke softly. Your father shot my 19-year-old son in the chest and let him bleed to death, and they called it justified. He spat the word. There is never a justification for killing another person's child. I looked over at Liam, who was still rocking and humming. Then why are you doing this to your child? I asked. Marcus's face remained like stone. David is aware of what is required. He has known for 12 years. Family requires sacrifice. My son accepts this. David's expression shattered, the gun in his hand lowered. I cannot, he whispered. Marcus, I cannot do it. Yes, you can, Marcus said, his voice like ice. Or Liam will die while you watch. Make your choice. One of the guards pointed his rifle toward Liam. A small red laser dot appeared on the boy's back, a tiny circle on his camouflage shirt. Liam continued humming, completely unaware. No! David moved forward and aimed his gun not at me, but at the guard. At once, all three rifles turned toward him. Red dots appeared on his chest. David, stop it! I yelled. He froze, breathing heavily. Put the gun down, I said in a lower voice. Please, that is not the way to save him. David looked at me. Is that true? He looked at me just like he did on our wedding night, and I saw all the feelings he had hidden away: love, guilt, and terrible grief. I never meant to cause you pain, he said. I know, I answered him. He let the gun hang by his side. Marcus sat back in his chair, smiling. How sweet, but we are losing time. The arrangement is quite simple. David will shoot you. Richard will watch on the private video feed I sent to him. Your mother and Liam will be set free. He paused and took a sip of his scotch. If David does not agree, I will set off both devices. Everyone here will die. Richard will still watch. The only thing that changes is if you die with mercy or in ruin. That is not a choice, I said. No, Marcus agreed. It is justice. From behind me, my mother whispered, Emma, the panic button. But I could not press it, not yet. A 30-second breach with bombs present could get us all killed. I had to buy more time. What will happen to David? I asked Marcus. If he shoots me, will you allow him to live? Marcus's smile grew wider. Of course not. David will die as well, but Liam will walk free. That is the exchange. David shut his eyes tightly. I looked at the little boy, his hands covering his ears. He was 7 years old and completely innocent. I looked at my mother, who was tied to a bomb with a zip tie. I thought about the baby growing inside me, 6 weeks old, a new life that had not even begun. Okay, I said. David's eyes flew open. Emma. Okay, I said again, louder this time, looking right at the camera. But first, I want to see Liam and my mother walk out safely. You let them go, and then David can shoot me. Marcus tilted his head, thinking it over. No, he said. You do not get to make deals. You are the payment. Do you remember? And then he smiled. Before I tell you what Marcus demanded in those last 60 seconds, and if David actually pulled the trigger, please leave a comment with the number 20 if you are still with me. That number is very important to this story. And I have to know that you are prepared for what happens next. A quick notice, the story that follows includes fictional scenes for dramatic effect. If you are not comfortable with intense material, you might want to stop here. Are you still listening? Let us go on. With no escape left, I stood before the man who had planned my ruin. You want my father to hurt because he killed Alexander? I asked, my voice holding steady. I can understand that. Marcus put his scotch down and leaned forward. Not killed, murdered. He was 19 years old. The report said it was in self-defense. Reports, Marcus scoffed. Your father's reports. They were written by his friends and approved by a prosecutor who was in his debt. Alexander fired a single shot because he was scared. Your father shot him 3 times in the chest and watched him bleed out on the pavement. I looked over at David. His face was pale, the gun still limp in his hand. I am not trying to defend what he did, I said with care. But forcing David to become a killer will only create more victims. Victims? Marcus let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You want to speak about victims? I will tell you about victims. I buried my son on what would have been his 20th birthday. I watched my wife drink herself to death in less than a year. David spent 3 years in a psychiatric hospital because he could not handle losing his brother. Do you really think I do not know about victims? Then do not make Liam another one, I pleaded. Marcus's eyes became narrow. Liam understands what sacrifice means. He is a Vulof. He is only 7 years old. He is old enough. The chill in his voice made my skin crawl. I decided to try a new approach. You are making David become the very thing you despise, a man who kills someone's child. How can you call that justice? Because Richard will be watching, Marcus said very simply, and he will know that it is all his fault. For the rest of his life, he will wake up every single day knowing his daughter is dead because he pulled a trigger 15 years ago. That is what justice is. Behind me, my mom whispered, Emma, do not. Marcus looked at her for a moment, then back at me. His face changed, showing something that looked almost like surprise. You did not tell her, he said to David. David's jaw was tight. He did not say a word. Tell me what? I asked. Marcus smiled. You are pregnant, about 6 weeks along. David has been checking your cycle, your symptoms, and your hormone levels from blood tests. He got the reports from your doctor's office. He paused for a moment. You are carrying my grandchild. I felt like all the air had been knocked out of me. My mom made a choking sound. Emma! Which makes this so much more fitting, Marcus went on. Richard will lose his daughter and his grandchild. I will lose my grandchild too, of course, but I have already lost one son. I know how to endure that kind of pain. Your father does not. I could not find my voice. I could not even breathe. David's face crumpled in pain. I did not want to. I tried to make him stop. You tried to do nothing, Marcus snapped. You have been delaying this for 6 months, David. You had 3 chances to get this done and you failed each time. The brake line in February, you cut it the wrong way. It gave her a warning light, the security system in May. You set off the secondary alarm. The water contamination in August, you used a dose so small a child could survive it. My thoughts were spinning. 3 attempts and 3 failures. David had been trying to kill me for half a year, but he had failed because he wanted to. You do not have the strength for it, Marcus said, his voice full of scorn. You are weak, just like Alexander was weak. David's hand gripped the gun tighter. So I am making it simple, Marcus said. David, raise your weapon. Aim it at Emma's chest. You will have 60 seconds. If you do not shoot, I will set off both devices. Your son will die. Her mother will die. Emma will die no matter what. Everyone will lose. The 3 guards on the platforms above adjusted their rifles, pointing them at David, ready to shoot if he aimed his gun anywhere else. 60 seconds, Marcus said again, starting right now. David slowly lifted the gun. It was shaking as he aimed it at my chest. His eyes were filled with tears. I am sorry, he whispered. Oh God, Emma, I am so very sorry. I looked at Marcus on the screen. You are lying. You would never kill your own grandchild. Marcus's smile did not fade. I have already sacrificed one of my sons. What is one grandchild to me? You are bluffing, I said. You are risking everything. The bombs are fake. You are just using fear to make David obey you. But there are no real explosives. 40 seconds, Marcus said in a calm voice. David's gun was shaking so much I could see it from 6 feet away. Marcus, please, is there truly a bomb attached to Liam? Please, 30 seconds, just answer me. David yelled, his gun still aimed at me, but his voice was completely breaking. Did you really put a bomb on my son? Marcus leaned back and swirled the scotch in his glass. Of course I did. Do you take me for a fool? The second the FBI breaks in, I will detonate it. The second you point that gun at anyone besides Emma, I will detonate it. And the second you do not pull that trigger in, he looked at his watch. 20 seconds, I will detonate it. David's face turned completely white. I looked at Liam in the corner, still rocking back and forth, still humming with his hands over his ears, with no idea that he was wearing a bomb. 7 years old. My hand touched the panic button inside my pocket. If Marcus was telling the truth, pushing it now would kill all of us. If he was lying, it was the only hope we had. I had 10 seconds left to make a choice. David's finger slid onto the trigger. I am sorry, he said one more time, and now his voice was completely empty and hollow. It was the sound of a man who had lost everything. 10 seconds, Marcus said. My mother screamed, Emma, no! David's gun became steady, aimed right at my heart. 5, I looked into David's eyes and I saw the very instant he made his choice. 4. His finger squeezed the trigger. 3. I pushed the panic button twice. 2. David's gun moved away from me, toward the screen, toward Marcus. 1. And then he fired. It all unfolded in just a few seconds, but the horror made time stretch on forever. David pulled the trigger. I flinched. The bullet tore through the enormous screen. Glass burst outward in a shower of sparkles. The image of Marcus's face broke into 1,000 pieces. His voice was cut off and replaced by the sound of sparking wires and rising smoke. The 3 guards on the platform spun around to face David, lifting their rifles. "Traitor!" one of them shouted. I pressed the panic button twice, very hard. The doors to the loading bay and the south entrance exploded inward. FBI agents in black gear poured inside like a great flood. Carter's voice boomed. "Federal agents, drop your weapons now!" A window high above us shattered. Sergeant Rodriguez, with his sniper rifle resting on the rooftop, fired 2 quick shots. 2 of the guards on the platforms fell backward and their rifles fell to the floor below. The last guard aimed his weapon at the FBI team. The 3rd shot from Rodriguez sent him falling. He crashed over the railing, his body slamming onto the concrete 30 feet below with a terrible sound. That is when I heard the beeping. It was high-pitched and fast, coming from 2 places at once. It came from Mom's chair and Liam's backpack. "A bomb!" someone screamed. David moved instantly. He ran to Liam and grabbed the camouflage backpack, pulling it from the boy's shoulders. Liam cried out, covering his ears with his hands. But David was already unzipping the bag. Inside was a cylinder with wires showing. A red light was flashing faster and faster. Beep, 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 beep. An FBI agent in a bomb suit rushed forward. He looked inside and shouted, "Flashbang, cover your eyes." It was too late. David was holding the device, staring at it. I saw the exact moment he realized what Marcus had done. It was not a bomb. It was a stun grenade, which is not lethal. It was a lie. The device exploded in his hands. The blast was a flash of white light and a roar of thunder. A shockwave hit us like a solid wall inside the plant. I covered my face with my arm, but the flash was so bright it burned right through my eyelids, searing my eyes. All sound disappeared. It was replaced by a single high-pitched ringing noise. The ringing was so loud that it felt like my eardrums were splitting open. I could not see, I could not hear, and I could not think. When my sight started to come back, I saw blurry shapes moving around. I saw David lying on his back 6 feet from where he had been. His hands were burned black with peeling skin and smoke rising from them. His eyes were open, but he was not seeing anything. His pupils were wide and his mouth was moving, but no sound came out. Liam was on the floor next to him. He was curled up in a ball, screaming without a sound. I could not hear him, but I saw his open mouth and his little body shaking. Mom was also screaming, or at least I think she was. Her chair was tipping over to the side. The zip ties were still tight around her wrists. The device under her seat was beeping faster. A second device was about to go off. The bomb technician yelled and ran toward her. Carter got to her first. He fell to his knees, pulled a multi-tool from his vest, and began to cut the zip ties. "Do not move. It is a pressure sensor." The side door, which no one was watching, suddenly burst open. 2 men dressed in black tactical gear came in. They were Vulov's backup team. Their rifles were up, and they were firing. The muzzle flashes looked like strobe lights in the dark corner. Bullets flew through the air. They slammed into steel tables and concrete walls, bouncing off with sparks. One of the FBI agents fell, grabbing his leg. Another agent shot back. Glass from the lights overhead shattered and fell down like shiny rain. Dad showed up in the doorway behind the shooters. Dad was supposed to be at Unit 20. He had his service pistol out and his face was full of rage. "Emma!" he screamed. One of the shooters turned to face him. I did not hear the shot, but I saw Dad fall behind a steel table. Bullets hit the metal right where he had been standing a moment before. Carter sliced through the last zip tie. He grabbed Mom by the arms and pulled her off the chair. The device under the chair exploded. It was another flashbang. It sent another wave of light, sound, and pressure. The chair was thrown backward, its metal legs bent. Mom and Carter were sent flying, and smoking pieces scattered on the floor. Mom rolled onto her side. She was coughing with her hands pressed to her ears, but she was alive. The firefight got more intense. FBI agents were behind cover and the backup shooters were moving forward. Bullets were flying everywhere. Rodriguez shot again from the roof, and one of the backup shooters fell down while running. The second shooter turned toward David. He was still on the ground, completely helpless. His hands were too burned to hold a gun. The shooter lifted his rifle and pointed it at David's head. I did not stop to think. I just ran forward. My legs pumped and blood pounded in my deaf ears. I crashed into David's shoulder and pushed him to the side. The bullet that was meant for his head went through my upper left shoulder instead. The pain was like an explosion, white hot and burning. It was worse than anything I'd ever felt before. My legs collapsed under me. I fell hard onto the concrete floor. Blood was already spreading across my shirt, feeling hot and sticky. Through the painful haze, I saw Dad get up from behind the steel table and fire his gun 3 times. The second backup shooter fell to the ground and his rifle slid away. The plant became quiet, or perhaps I just could not hear anything anymore. I was lying on my back, looking up at the meat hooks hanging from the ceiling. Blood was pooling on the floor beneath me. My shoulder felt like it was on fire. The pain shot down my arm, up into my neck and into my jaw. I could not move my left hand. I could not feel my fingers. David's face appeared above me. His burned hands hovered over me, unable to help. Tears were running down his face, which was black with soot. His mouth was moving, making words I could not hear. I tried to talk. My voice was far away and muffled, like I was underwater. Why? David was asking. I was able to read his lips. Why did you save me? Blood came up into my throat. I coughed and tasted copper. Because, I said, each word was agony. Someone has to end this cycle. His face broke down. He leaned over me and his forehead touched mine. I felt his tears fall onto my cheeks. Dad was suddenly there. He kneeled next to me, pressing his hands hard on my shoulder. I could not hear what he was saying, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Behind him, FBI medics rushed in. One of them was cutting my shirt, and another was pressing gauze on the wound. Mom crawled over to me. Her bruised face appeared in my sight, which was getting smaller. Her lips were moving. Stay with me, baby. Stay with me. I tried to nod my head. I wanted to tell her I was fine, but the edges of my vision were turning dark. The pain was turning into a strange, cold numbness, and the last thing I saw before I blacked out was little Liam. He was a traumatized boy being carried out by an FBI agent. His hands were still covering his ears and his mouth was open in a scream I could not hear. And David, with his ruined hands, was reaching for me. The smell of antiseptic and a steady beeping sound woke me up. I saw white ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights that were turned down low. An IV line was attached to my left arm. My right shoulder was wrapped in thick bandages, and a dull pain pulsed with each beat of my heart. I was in a hospital. I turned my head slowly. Everything ached. I saw Dad sleeping in a chair next to my bed. His chin was on his chest, and he was still wearing his tactical vest over his bloody shirt. He woke up suddenly when I moved. His eyes were red and looked panicked. Emma, he said, and his voice was shaky. He took my hand and held it tightly. Thank God. You were out for 2 hours. They told me the surgery went well, but the baby, I whispered. My free hand automatically went to my stomach. Is the baby okay? The door opened. A woman in a white coat came in. She was in her late 40s with dark hair pulled back and a stethoscope around her neck. Her name tag said Dr. Rachel Bennett, OB/GYN in trauma surgery. Miss Martinez, she said as she pulled over a rolling stool. I am Dr. Bennett. I have been in charge of your care. How do you feel? The baby, I said again, this time louder. Is the baby okay? Dr. Bennett's face was calm but serious. The fetal heartbeat is strong and steady. That is the good news. I held my breath and waited. The gunshot wound went straight through. It entered your upper left shoulder and came out cleanly through the trapezius muscle. There is no damage to the bone and no major arteries were hit. You will need physical therapy, but you should recover full function. But, I asked because I could feel there was something more. Dr. Bennett pulled up a tablet and swiped to an ultrasound picture. The trauma, the stress, the spike in your blood pressure, and the physical impact caused something we call a subchorionic hematoma. It is a blood clot between the wall of your uterus and the sac that holds the baby. I looked at the grainy black and white picture. In the center, there was a tiny flicker, which was the heartbeat. Next to it was a dark shadow. What does that mean? Dad asked in a quiet voice. It means there is a higher risk of miscarriage for the next 2 to 3 weeks, Dr. Bennett said. Right now, Miss Martinez is about 6 to 7 weeks pregnant. This is still the high-risk first trimester. The hematoma might go away on its own, or it could cause bleeding and a loss of the pregnancy. The room started to spin. I grabbed the side of the bed. What can I do? I asked. Complete bed rest for 14 days. You will need progesterone supplements to help the pregnancy. No physical activity and no stress. She stopped and gave me a direct look. I know that might be hard given what happened, but your body needs time to heal. The next 2 weeks are very important. Will my baby live? I whispered. Dr. Bennett's expression softened. I cannot give you any guarantees, but I have seen women get better from worse things. Give your body time. Rest. Let us keep a close eye on you. I nodded as tears started to fall. I felt both relief and terror at the same time. Dad squeezed my hand. We will make sure you get your rest. I will stay here with you. Your mother will too after she is released. Mom is here? I asked. 2 floors down, Dad answered. She has bruised ribs and a mild concussion, but she is all right. Carter brought her here right after they brought you. As if he heard his name, Carter showed up in the doorway. He was still in his tactical gear and looked like he had not slept for days. Miss Martinez, he said with a nod. I am glad to see you are awake. What happened after I passed out? I asked. Carter walked into the room and crossed his arms. We took control of the plant. 3 of Volkov's men are dead and 2 are in custody. Your mother and Liam were brought here to be checked. Liam is with Child Protective Services for now. A physical exam shows he has no injuries, but he is extremely traumatized. He has not spoken since the flashbang. My chest felt tight. And David? Carter's face became stern. He is in federal custody, handcuffed to a hospital bed 1 floor above us. His hands needed skin grafts for second-degree burns. He will face many charges, including conspiracy, accessory to kidnapping, attempted murder, and racketeering. And Marcus? I asked. He got away, Carter said, his voice tight with anger. He took a private jet from a small airstrip outside of Houston. He landed in Monterrey, Mexico 6 hours ago. Interpol is on alert with a red notice, and we have frozen $18 million in assets from Volkov Enterprises. 40 members of his operation were arrested across 3 states. I stated plainly, but he is gone. Carter leaned on the wall and replied, For the moment, but David's help will be absolutely essential. He knows all the safe houses, every contact, and each financial path Marcus takes. His testimony has the power to bring down the whole operation. I shut my eyes. He wanted to see me, right? Carter gave a slight nod. He asked for you by name. He wants you to be his lawyer. A bitter, tired laugh escaped me. That is a clear conflict of interest. I am one of his victims. I cannot represent him. Carter said, He is aware of that, but he puts his trust in you, and honestly, Miss Martinez, your strategic advice, even if unofficial, could truly save lives. The sooner we find Marcus, the more secure everyone will be. I glanced at my dad. His jaw was set firmly, but he remained silent. I will go see him, I said in a low voice, just this one time, and not as his legal counsel, as something else. Dr. Bennett looked displeased. Miss Martinez, I must strongly advise against this. 5 minutes, I stated. After that, I will get some rest. I give you my word. 20 minutes later, a nurse was wheeling me toward the hospital's secure section. A pair of federal marshals guarded the door to David's room. Inside, David was sitting up in bed. Both of his hands were heavily bandaged to the elbows, an oxygen tube was clipped to his nose, and his ankle was handcuffed to the bed's frame. His head lifted as I came in. His face looked drained, with sunken eyes and cracked lips. Emma, he whispered. I moved my wheelchair close to his bed, taking care not to bump my injured shoulder. I am not your attorney. I am not able to be. However, I will offer strategic advice for Liam's benefit, not for yours. David gave a nod, swallowing with difficulty. I understand. A long silence filled the space between us. Did you ever truly love me? The question I had held back since the incident finally came out. Tears welled in David's eyes. It began as a performance. Marcus handed me your file and instructed me to learn about you, to become the ideal man for you. But by our 3rd date, his voice faltered. By our 3rd date, I had already fallen in love with you. From then on, I was just trying to find an escape. You had 5 years, I told him. I know. A tear traced a path down his face. I am not looking for your forgiveness. I just need you to believe that it was real. It may have started as a deception, but it became true. I glanced at his injured hands, thought about the new life growing inside of me, and recalled my choice to shove him away from the bullet. I cannot act as your lawyer, I said again. It is a conflict of interest. But I can help organize your defense. I will recommend a good lawyer and consult on any plea agreements. This is for Liam, not for you. He should have a father who attempts to do what is right, no matter how late it is. David shut his eyes and nodded. I started to wheel myself to the door. Emma, he said quietly. I glanced back at him. Thank you for saving me. I did not answer. I just rolled out of the room. Back in my own room, Dr. Bennett was there with some documents. I am sending you to Dr. Sarah Williams. She is an OB specialist who works with trauma patients. She will be checking on you carefully for the next month. I was exhausted and just nodded. The door swung open once more. My mom stood there using a crutch. Her face was still bruised, but her gaze was intense. Emma, my dear, she said, her voice shaking, I have to tell you something about the day they took me. I looked at her, this amazing woman who sat on a bomb for my sake, who endured Marcus Volkov's fury, and I had a feeling that her next words would change our world. What is it, Mom? She looked over at Dad, then met my eyes again. She whispered, I already knew. At my mom's request, Dad went out into the hallway. This was a conversation for just the two of us. Mom carefully sat in the chair next to my bed. She leaned her crutch on its armrest, her bruised face a mix of shame and resolve. What did you mean you knew? I asked softly. She drew a shaky breath. 8 months ago, an envelope showed up on our porch. It had no return address or stamp, only my name in capital letters. I waited. Inside were papers, my mom went on, her voice barely audible. There were police reports, psych evaluations, and photos from a crime scene. They were all connected to the night your father shot Alexander Vulov. My stomach felt like it was in knots. What information did they have? That Richard had murdered him without mercy. Tears gathered in my mom's eyes. They said Alexander was not armed, that he was shot from behind, and that your father placed a weapon on him afterward to claim self defense. It said the entire story was a lie, that his fellow officers helped cover it up, and a corrupt prosecutor approved it all. I just stared at her. You actually believed that? I did not know what to believe, she confessed, her voice strained. There were pictures, Emma. Crime scene photos I had not seen before. The angles just seemed wrong. And a psychological report stated that your father had antisocial traits. It said he had been cited for using too much force 3 times before Alexander died. Mom, there was a letter inside. She cut me off, taking a folded paper from her pocket with unsteady hands. This one? She gave it to me. I gently unfolded it and saw the typed message. Mrs. Martinez, your husband is a dangerous man. He has been deceiving you for 15 years. He is now making your daughter his target. I want to keep her safe, but I require your assistance. Please call this number. A concerned father. A phone number was at the bottom. There was no name. A concerned father, I said aloud. A cold feeling washed over me as I understood. Marcus. Mom nodded and wiped a tear away. I did not know it was him back then. I only knew that if Richard posed any threat to you, I had to find out the truth. So you dialed the number. No. Mom just shook her head. I am not a fool, Emma. I have been married to a police officer for 30 years. I understand how evidence is supposed to work. So I brought the documents to a private investigator. I picked someone who was not with the Austin Police Department and had no ties to your father, and I asked for his help. He performed forensic analysis, checking the paper and the ink, and looked at the digital information from the scanned police documents. My mom's voice grew steady and more confident. Every last document was a fake. They were very well made, expensive fakes, but they were not real. The crime scene pictures had been digitally changed. The psych evaluation was a fraud, created with a real doctor's stolen information. The note itself was on paper made this year, not 15 years ago. A wave of relief washed over me. So you were sure Dad was not guilty? I was sure Marcus Vulov was trying to deceive me, Mom corrected. But I did not figure out his reasons until it was almost too late. What are you talking about? Mom's grip tightened on her crutch until her knuckles were white. The investigator explained that the fake documents had a single purpose. They were meant to make me question Richard, to make me fearful of him, to drive me away from my own family. She met my gaze, her eyes looking pained. Emma, Marcus was using my love for you against me. He was sure that if I believed you were in harm's way, I would do anything, even turn on my own husband. But you did not do that, I pointed out. I attempted to warn Richard, Mom explained. On the day of the funeral, I planned to talk to him privately, to show him the envelope and explain it all. But when I arrived at the cemetery, her voice broke. 2 men grabbed me in the parking garage. They used chloroform on me. I came to, tied to that chair with zip ties. I took her hand and held it tightly. I am so sorry, Mom whispered. I should have gone to Richard as soon as I received that envelope. I should have put my faith in him, but I was frightened and I needed confirmation first. Marcus took advantage of that. Mom, I said, getting her to look at me. You did have faith in Dad. You got an investigator to confirm the documents were fraudulent. You attempted to tell him. You did not betray him at all. I waited too long, she insisted. And because I waited, you were almost killed. No. I squeezed her hand with more force. Marcus is the one who almost got me killed. You defended us in the only way you could by seeking the truth. That is not a betrayal. That is a sign of courage. Mom started to cry with tears running down her face. I was so terrified. While I was sitting on that bomb, my only thought was, if I do not survive, you will never know that I did not turn against your father. You will believe I was helping Marcus. I never believed that, I told her, even though a small part of me wondered if I might have, had things turned out differently. Marcus's plan was for us to tear each other apart from within, Mom said, wiping her tears. He wanted Richard to believe I had betrayed him. He wanted you to believe I was involved. He wanted me to be paralyzed with fear. He hoped our family would collapse on its own before he even fired a shot. I recalled the 5 years David had worked his way into my life, the constant watching, the deceptions, the slow and careful erosion of trust. That is his method, I said in a low voice. He does not just end lives, he makes people destroy each other. Mom nodded, and he nearly got what he wanted. The door opened. Dad was standing there, his expression unsure, looking from me to her. Richard, Mom said, her voice heavy with emotion. I have something to tell you. I heard, Dad said softly as he entered the room. I was right outside the door. I am sorry, Linda. I just had to know. Mom's face crumbled. I should have told you from the start. Dad walked over in 3 quick steps and wrapped her in a hug. You did precisely what I would have done. You checked the facts before you acted. That is not a betrayal. That is just good police work. Mom cried on his shoulder. I looked at them. My parents had lived under the shadow of Marcus Vulov for 15 years. They had been tricked and frightened and almost broken. And I felt a change deep inside me. Marcus had tried to use us as weapons against one another, but he had not succeeded. I motioned for Dad. Both of you, please come here. They came to stand on each side of my hospital bed. I reached for their hands, holding one in each of mine. From this moment on, I said with a steady voice, this family is honest. No more secrets, no more waiting. We stand together or we do not stand at all. Dad nodded, his jaw tight. Mom squeezed my hand. Together. Together. I whispered the word to myself. Outside, the sun was rising over the city in shades of pink and gold. It was a new day. We made it through the night. Now we had to figure out how to live through the rest of our lives. 2 years had changed everything. Life was not perfect, but we were surviving. I was 36 now, and I visited the Texas State Prison every month. Daniel, my 2-year-old, sat on my lap. He had dark curls just like his father, but my eyes bright and curious. He was full of questions I could not answer yet. Across the glass, David sat in a wheelchair. His hands worked again after 3 surgeries, but his legs were still. He was paralyzed from the waist down. A piece of metal from the explosion had cut his spinal cord. He was in year 2 of a 12-year sentence. David's voice was soft as he pressed his hand to the glass. He has gotten so big, he said. Daniel copied him, putting his tiny hand against the barrier. Da! He shouted. My heart ached. He is talking more now. Dada, Mama, no. A sad, broken smile crossed David's face. That sounds about right, he said. Liam sat next to me. He was 9 years old now, and much quieter than other boys his age. Sometimes he came on these visits. Other times it was just too much for him. Today was a good day. Hey, buddy, David said to his oldest son. Hi, Dad. Liam replied, his voice small but clear. I thought back to the early days when none of this felt real. 2 weeks after the shooting, I was on bed rest, looking at an ultrasound. The doctor pointed to a dark spot next to the tiny beating heart. The bruise is getting smaller, she had told me. That is a very good sign. 4 weeks later, it was gone completely. Your baby is a fighter, Miss Martinez. I started to cry with relief and disbelief. Daniel had fought to live, and so had I. He was born in January of 2024. He was a healthy 7 pounds, 3 ounces. The nurses all called him the miracle baby. I held him, feeling tired and sore, but so full of love. You fought so hard to be here, I whispered to him. Thank you. 2 days later, Liam met his little brother. He stood beside my hospital bed, looking nervous. You can touch him, I said softly. Liam reached out a single finger and brushed against Daniel's tiny hand. Daniel's fingers closed around his, and a real smile spread across Liam's face for the first time in months. Now, as I watched Daniel press his hand against the glass to copy his dad, I felt the heavy weight of those 2 years. The surgeries, the therapy sessions, the court hearings. We were slowly putting together something that almost felt like a normal life. I can still remember the day Marcus was arrested. I was 6 months pregnant and standing in my living room with my dad, watching the news. On the screen, Marcus Vulov was in handcuffs, surrounded by police, being put on a plane. His face showed no emotion, but his cold eyes scanned the cameras. It was like he was memorizing every single face. Carter stood at a podium. He said, based on information from a cooperating witness, David Vulov, Mexican police, and the FBI raided a villa outside Puerto Vallarta. Marcus Volkov is now in United States custody and will face federal charges. My dad looked at me, answering my unasked question. Marcus escaped on a private jet the night of the raid. The flight was listed as a medical transport for a sick patient. By the time we realized what was happening, his plane was already in Mexico. He had protection from a cartel in Puerto Vallarta. He thought no one could ever touch him there. But David told us where he was. Carter explained it at the news conference. David gave them the location of the house, the security codes, and all the escape routes. Without his help, Marcus would still be free. Instead, Marcus will now spend the rest of his days in a prison cell. I sat down, my body feeling heavy, and placed a hand on my pregnant belly. Tears ran down my face. "It is over," I whispered. "It is really over." My dad squeezed my shoulder. "Not until the trial," he said, "but we are close." The trial started in October of 2024, a year after the shooting. I sat in the courtroom with Daniel, who was 3 months old and sleeping in a carrier on my chest. Marcus Vulov sat at the defense table. He wore a gray suit and his silver hair was combed perfectly. He looked like a normal businessman, not a monster. David gave his testimony on a video screen from prison. His face was thin, but his voice was strong. "My father planned the kidnapping of Linda Martinez. He held my 7-year-old son hostage with a bomb to make me obey him. He ordered me to kill Emma Martinez and her father, Richard Martinez. When I said no, he set off grenades that injured me permanently." The jury took only 4 hours to decide. Guilty on all charges, the sentence was life in prison without parole, plus an extra 80 years. He was being sent to ADX Florence, Colorado, the prison for the worst criminals in the country. The judge's voice was like ice. "Mr. Volkov, you used your own family as weapons. You put children in danger. You will now spend your life in a concrete box, and the world will be a safer place." Marcus showed no emotion. But as the guards led him away, he passed the screen with David's face. His lips moved, forming silent words. "You are dead to me." On the screen, I saw pain on David's face, but I also saw relief. He was finally free. Now, 2 years later, I watched David talk to his sons through the thick glass. I felt something shift inside me. It was not forgiveness, not really. It was more like acceptance. That night, we had Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Liam helped my mom set the table while I fed Daniel mashed sweet potatoes. My dad pulled a large pan from the oven, but the metal lid slipped from his grasp. It hit the floor with a loud crashing sound. Liam instantly froze. His hands flew to his ears and his breathing became quick and shallow. His eyes were wide with fear. I was next to him in a second, kneeling on the floor. My voice was calm. "Liam, look at me. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. His breathing started to slow down. 4, 5, 6. Good. You are safe. It was just a pot lid. You are okay." He nodded slowly and lowered his hands. "I am sorry." Loud noises were still a trigger for his trauma. "I know, sweetheart," I said. "You are doing great." Later, while we were cleaning up, Liam asked me a quiet question. "Am I going to be broken like my dad? I have PTSD." I knelt down again to look him in the eyes. "You are not broken. You are healing. Scars mean you survived something hard. You are going to grow up to be strong and brave, Liam. I know you will." He looked at me. "Daniel almost did not get born, right?" I was surprised by his question. "That is right. After everything that happened, the doctors were not sure, but he fought to be here just like you are fighting to heal." Liam looked over at his baby brother and his expression softened. "He is tough," Liam said. "So are you," I replied. That night, after Daniel went to sleep, I checked my phone. I had an email from the prison system. It was an update on Marcus Vulov. Status: incarcerated. Location: ADX Florence, Colorado. Security level maximum. Parole hearing not applicable. Sentence: life without parole. I showed the email to my dad. "They are keeping him at ADX Florence. That is where they put the worst criminals." My dad nodded. "El Chapo, the Unabomber, the Boston Marathon bomber. Marcus is one of them now." "Do you feel safe?" I asked him. My dad looked at Daniel sleeping peacefully nearby. "Safe? No. Marcus had connections. Someone from his old life might still try to get revenge someday. But Marcus himself?" He looked right at me. "He is 67 years old. He is in a 7 by 12-foot cell for 23 hours a day, all alone. He will die in that place. So yes, we are safer than we were 2 years ago." I nodded slowly. That was enough for me. Later, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, looking at the stars over Austin. I thought about all the things we had survived. Marcus was locked away in a concrete tomb. He was never getting out, but I still had security cameras and panic buttons. My system could call the police in 90 seconds. It was not because of Marcus. It was because someone from his old organization might still be out there holding a grudge. Carter had warned me. We cut off the head of the snake, but parts of the body are still moving. Still, knowing Marcus would die in that cell helped me breathe a little easier. I looked up at the stars, my hand moving to my stomach out of habit, even though Daniel was now 2 years old. My life was not what I had planned, but it belonged to me, and Marcus Vulov could never hurt my family again. When I think about it all, I realize this story is not just about revenge or betrayal. It is about stopping a painful cycle that can destroy a family for generations. Marcus used his own grief as a weapon to control his son for 15 years. David was trapped between loyalty to his father and his love for me. He was forced into an impossible choice. He had to either kill me or watch his own child die. I was almost another victim in a story of family revenge. I nearly lost my parents, my husband, and my unborn baby. It all happened because one man chose payback instead of healing. David's betrayal of our family was not caused by hate. It was caused by fear and many years of emotional control. I learned a valuable lesson from this. Do not let someone else's anger trap you. Do not believe the people you love are perfect. But do not stop loving them after you see the truth. And most of all, I am so grateful for second chances. I am grateful my baby is alive and well. I am grateful my mother was brave enough to find the real story instead of giving in to fear. I am grateful that David decided to shoot a television screen and not me. Here's my advice, please learn from what I went through. Do not overlook the warning signs just because you are in love. You should trust people, but you should also check the facts. If this story made an impact on you, please tell me in the comments. What would you do if you learned that your parent had faked their own passing? Please share this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is so important to us. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. As a final thought, our next stories may have some details that are not real to help teach a lesson. If this is not the right content for you, please feel free to watch something else. Be well.